Oh, hey, everybody. Listen, usually we have doom and gloom and everything else on here, and I know that all complaining and no fun makes Paul a boring guy. But I do want to take you on a learning lesson, and it's going to be more or less an odyssey because that's what happens when you watch a quality movie like The Bounty or something like this. It turns out to be an odyssey where your mind expands out so much and you learn so much. So, coming here to this channel, you're going to see that I do have knowledge and I share it with people, and I don't charge you for that, and nor should I. Anyways, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you about what happened yesterday when I cut the woman's yard that I've cut for like 5, 6 years. I've cut her for a long, long period of time. Now, she has a class 2 personality. She was a supervisor at work. She lives next to some sort of city mayor arrangement, or somebody that's very buddy with the city mayor or whatever it is. And she's a type 2 character. You can believe it, okay? Now, I kind of figured things out today, and it took me a while to do it. I didn't finally come up with this because sometimes I'm slow. You understand? Some people, like my contemporaries, they'll pick up on stuff very quickly if you go to an Ivy League school. I mean, they'll run it right down to you, and they don't need much time. I need time sometime, okay? So that's what happened to me today. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the Milgram experiment. And, you're not a genius if you know about it. It doesn't mean that you're super high intellect or you have a super high IQ. But what it does mean is that you're familiar with the basics of human manipulation of people who can determine character of people. Things like this. And the Milgram experiment was done many times. There were like 14 different experiments, or it could be more. Forgot now. I read on it a little bit. And they've copied it many times too. And this is obviously what has gone into the mix in order to enslave us as it is right now. So believe me when I tell you, this is what's this was the basis for what they did to us, okay? And it's important that you know about it. And a lot of you think that you're as smart as me, but you're not. And you're, oh, yeah, I know about the Milgram. No, you don't. You probably don't. I didn't for a long time. I knew about it for a long time, but I didn't know the final analysis. And I'm going to draw some beautiful, just really interesting comparisons to this, okay? And it's funny. It's kind of funny in a way, because the Milgram experiment was done to try to figure out how Adolf Hitler was able to get his people, I mean like almost everybody, to some degree or another, especially his military people, to do bad things and things that were definitely across the line and dark. And they were trying to figure out how he did it, because, some said it was his oration, which is his talking presence and his cult of personality. Other people said that, all sorts of different things. But I've got a fun one to go over with you today, and it's fun, okay? The final result, the final takeaway is complicated with the Milgram affair, okay? The Milgram experiment. Now, let's take a look at it. I'll just let you take a little brief look at it. And you go ahead and you take a look at this, and and then we'll discuss this more. Okay?
Get back out there. Go.
Sorry, folks. I have to get off the commercial, and then we'll go into this fun.
One of the most famous studies of obedience in psychology was carried out by Stanley Milgram, a psychologist at Yale University.
In Connecticut, by the way. Yale's in Connecticut, where I'm from.
Obedience to authority and
New
personal
Haven, I think.
conscience. In 1963, Milgram examined justifications for acts of genocide offered by those accused at the World War II Nuremberg war criminal trials. Their defense often was based on obedience, that they were just following orders from their superiors. Milgram devised the experiment to answer the question: could it be that those who committed such atrocities in the Holocaust were just following orders? Could we call them all accomplices? Milgram wanted to investigate whether Germans were particularly obedient to authority figures, as this was a common explanation for the Nazi killings in World War II. Milgram selected participants for his experiment by newspaper, advertising for male participants to take part in a study of learning at Yale University. The procedure was that the participant was paired with another person, and they drew lots to find out who would be the learner and who would be the teacher. The draw was fixed so that the participant was always the teacher.
It was fixed.
And the learner
This was arranged
hired,
to
pretending
fool
be a real
the participant
Learner
into thinking that he was
actor
shocking
called
people
Mr.
in
Wallace.
reality. In reality, they were not shocking the people.
Electrodes attached to his
They
arm.
believed they were
Teacher and
because they had
researcher went into
recorded
the room,
reactions.
saw that it contained an electric shock generator and a row of switches marked from 15 volts, which is a slight shock, to 375 volts,
Which could kill
which had
you,
a danger reading of severe shock, and up to 450 volts,
which could kill you
is enough
easily.
to kill a human being.
Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go in. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
The experiment
Participants
requires that you
comprised
continue.
40 males
That's all.
aged between 20 and 50, whose job ranged from unskilled to professional.
And it wasn't just unskilled people. There were a wide range of people, from professionals to probably pilots and doctors
taking on the role as
to hobos.
the experimenter, who was also an actor, was dressed in a grey lab coat, played by an actor, not Milgram himself. 2 rooms in the Yale laboratory were used, one for the learner with an electric chair, and another for the teacher and the experimenter with an electric shock generator. The learner, Mr. Wallace, was strapped to a chair by electrodes. After he had learned a list of paired words given to him to learn, the teacher tests him by naming a word and then asking the learner to recall its partner or pair from a list of 4
So
choices.
this is in complicated British English, and I'll explain this to you. He had some remorse about administering shock to these subjects who were giving incorrect answers, which were rigged. It was rigged that way. That's what this is all about.
There were 4 prods, and if one was not obeyed, then the experimenter, who was called Mr. Williams, read out the next prod, and so on. The 4 prods were, firstly, please continue. Secondly, the experiment requires you to continue. 3, it is absolutely essential that you continue.
Yep.
4, you have no other choice but to continue. So what were the results of the study?
I think over half
That 65%,
continued to the
almost
maximum
2/3 of
voltage.
The participants who played the role as the teachers administering the electric shock continued to the highest levels of 450 volts. All the participants continued to at least 300 volts. Milgram did more than one experiment. In fact, he carried out 18 variations.
Yeah,
of
I
the
knew that
study,
there were quite a
all
few.
with similar results. So this can't be taken as once-off random and non-occurring event. All he did was alter the situation to see how this affected obedience. From the results of the study, Milgram developed a theory called the agency theory.
This is
Milgram explained
important.
the behavior of his participants by suggesting that people have 2 states of behavior when they are in a social situation. The first is the autonomous state. People direct their own actions and they take responsibility for the results of those actions. Then there is the agentic state. People allow others to direct their actions and then pass off the responsibility for those consequences to the person giving the orders. In other words, they act.
And that's where we have to go with this, and that's where I'm going to help you folks out now, because I have a beautiful analogy for this. It's really funny, too. the Milgram experiment, the big takeaway was what they basically found is that there were two states of mind. The first state of mind is where you're taking responsibility for what you're doing. At a certain point where you're doing things that you know are wrong and you're being instructed to do them, you do it, and as some sort of preamble to protection to your brain, you do it with the assumption that you're going to pass the guilt onto the person who's telling you that you have to do this. And they're not holding a gun to your head. They're just saying that it's important for the experiment to continue. You have no choice. You have to continue. And they were not forced. This is the big takeaway from the Milgram experiment. And that's what a lot of people, including myself, did not understand. Okay? Now I'm going to draw a funny comparison to you. Okay? How does this relate? Well, it kind of relates. There was a guy, I can't remember, it was Tommy something, and I've looked for it and I cannot find it. But Ed Sullivan was a kind of a funny guy. He was a kind of an interesting character. And he had a TV show called The Ed Sullivan Show. And the old joke about him was he really didn't have any original thoughts. He followed the script and the cue cards. And the old joke about Ed Sullivan was when he would go to cross the street, he would look and he'd say, "Don't walk," because he'd see the sign flashing. So that's about how original his thoughts were. However, he wasn't a dodo. And on this one that he did, and I've seen it and I've tried to pull it back up again. It's the funniest thing in the world. There were two college teams that were playing in a Pro Bowl. It was the final Pro Bowl of something or another. And it was Alabama versus Rutgers or something. I forgot what it was. They were major schools. And the one guy broke out and he was getting ready to score a touchdown. He was running down the right side line, right in front of the bench of the losing team there. And this guy, Tommy, whatever his name was, he just wasn't going to have any more of it. And he went and he jumped off the bench and he tripped the guy. He tripped the runner. And the runner didn't even know what was going on. And they interviewed the man, and he said he didn't even know where he was because it was completely unexpected. And the funny thing about it was that Ed Sullivan had him as a guest the next week on his show, or it was recent, you know what I mean? It's fresh in everybody's mind because this was a study, okay? And that was the whole thing. This was a study. And Ed Sullivan, although he was, not thought of as real intellectual, I thought he was with this, because what he did was he invited the young man that tripped the player, and he interviewed him, and he didn't do it in an aggressive manner. He did it in a funny manner. He did it, he said, and he was like laughing during the whole thing, and he's going, well, everybody's seen the tape, and I just want to say that I want you to explain this to everybody. And, the guy's a young Southern guy who's like a hillbilly guy, and he just didn't want to lose. And Ed Sullivan said, why don't you explain it? And he said, we were losing already, and we just had enough of Alabama. We just had enough of them. And I had enough of them. So I went and I tripped the runner. And Ed Sullivan started like really smiling, like talking to him. And he said, Tommy, can you tell us why did you do it? And Tommy really couldn't give him an answer. And his answer was, I had enough of Alabama, which is the team they were playing, or Rutgers or whatever it was. And he had just had enough. And Ed Sullivan was really trying to pick his brain. You know what I mean? To really get inside his core of his mentality of what he was thinking why and how a man could do such a thing on national television, no less. You know, this was a nationally televised Pro Bowl. So I draw that in comparison to the Milgram experiment because it's similar. Like I told you, the big takeaway is the release of personal responsibility because the others above you have told you what to do and have given you your marching orders, and that's what you carry out. Now, I'm a little bit slow. I never told you that I was a genius. Like, I couldn't join Mensa. I couldn't do that. I'm not that kind of... I told this before, I can't even figure out how air conditioning works. They explain it to me and I don't understand it. Okay? Honestly. But some things I do get, and this is one of them. And after I did my news today and was, fooling about with that, with RL2, I began to realize what this was. And I said to myself, this is the Milgram experiment. What we're in right now. And I knew it before. I mentioned it. But I did not precisely get it right. But I knew it was the Milgram experiment. I knew enough about that. Now, why is it? Because the exact same behavior is being played out. Now, yesterday with the woman, I really had my fill with her because we got into an argument about, it wasn't heated or anything, but I made myself clear. And she's mad at everybody because she's one of the shockers in the Milgram experiment. And it took me a long time to figure this out, and I finally did, and I know I'm right. And this is why I want you all to know this too. Because you're going to be surprised and you're going to say, yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. If you know about the Milgram experiment and all the conditions. She's mad because she's done her part, and the news keeps telling her that the reason all of this is going awry and that this doesn't go away is because of the bad people who do not want to do various things. And she has a great deal of anger toward them, and it's being fed to her by her city commissioner neighbor, as well as others, and the television, and anyone else that clout that she's rubbing elbows with. Does this sound familiar? You know what the big key takeaway was? And you'll be happy you listened to me here. She's a victim of the same shenanigans as the Milgram experiment. In other words, what she's doing is she doesn't understand. Just like the subjects that were being tested in the Milgram experiment, they didn't know that when they were administering the shock, they thought that the person was in the other room suffering. They were getting recorded. They didn't know. It sounded very real. They thought they were shocking the people. They were not. It was all staged. Now, it was staged to make it appear to the person giving the shocks. And that was the whole basis of the test, to find out if they do it and why. And you've got the same exact thing. It's almost precise in an analogous state. Because this woman, along with all the rest of these people who are getting really upset that others are not joining them in doing this, and you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about jabbing, and I can't say too much because you know why. She's a shocker. Okay? She's not a shockee. She's a shocker. And what she hasn't figured out yet is that this is all rigged. And she thinks it's real, just like the shockers in the Milgram experiment. Except there's one thing that's happened that you folks may not know. And that is the questions that were asked in the Milgram experiment were reasonable. They were not unreasonable. They were reasonable. But it was all a put on. The basic thing of that was that the person got it wrong, you shock them. Okay? She's moved to a dangerous new step. And that is, she now has seen so many of these people that she thinks are real people in there that are answering the questions wrong. In fact, there's nobody in there. Do you understand? But she's getting this information, going through it over and over again, these people that were giving the shock, and eventually, as you become more buddy-buddy with the people responsible for the Milgram experiment that were with you, you begin to not feel sorry for the people that you're shocking. And that's exactly what's happened to her. It's a tragic, dangerous state of mind. And I will not go see her, talk to her, or associate with her in any manner, because what she's done, I mentioned to her about, I said, Rodrigo Duterte wants to put people in jail and give them a medicine designed for animals if they refuse the regular one. And she said, that's good. She's completely at home with the idea of poisoning somebody. Poisoning, folks. Poisoning. Do you understand what that means? And arrest. Why? Because in her unknown Milgram experiment that we're going through, she's getting faulty information, in my opinion, and blaming it on the subjects because they can't answer the question right. Do you folks understand what I'm saying here? And they keep telling her, the news and all the rest of her good buddy friends like the mayor and the city commissioners, that it's these terrible people and they just need to follow directions. Just like in the Milgram experiment, except none of them understand what they're doing. They're all being fed nonsense. You understand? They're all being fed nonsense by the powers that be. You understand? And they're developing the same mental degeneration and sickness, because that's what I think of her right now. She is one of the most sick people I have ever met in my life. If you think that it is appropriate to give somebody a medicine intended for animals, which is not approved by the World Health Organization, and it's not, I read it. It's not approved. It's designed for pigs and other animals as an antibacterial is what I heard. That's what I read and saw on major newscasts. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that he's done that yet. I'm saying that's what he's threatened. If somebody can align themselves with that thinking without a clear thought of regression there, or regret, or at least a minor thing that says, wait a minute, that I'm not with. But you see, folks, they're completely on board now. They do not know that this is all rigged. They don't know. That is why you must take my hand and you must join me, because that's all the reason you need to know. It is by design that we cannot fight this. It's by design. We are not a certain profession that can offer insight on this, but it is the pattern, and it is the multiple, ongoing, unbreakable pattern that gives this away. And you know this. And it is exactly just like those superheroes will tell you. That is exactly how they catch Black Widow nurses. That's exactly how they do it. And they've caught them for hundreds of years, including on Civil War patients. when the deaths would go up, they would look and investigate by the pattern. This went on for hundreds of years, folks. We're not just talking about something recent. And that's how they'd catch them. You understand? It happens in other ways too. We had a guy down here at the 7-Eleven. He kept getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And eventually, they caught him because he was doing drugs. And they caught him because he wasn't really aware of how he was looking over a period of time. And that's how people look when they start doing drugs. That's how they start to behave. They caught him. It's by the pattern. That is the way. The superheroes and the professional superheroes, they are not going to allow us to be able to do anything. It is up to us to understand the pattern and know what this is. This was the most important video with the most important information I've ever done, because I believe I've hit it on the head. These people are, the higher up they're going, like I told you, my friend Danny, I told you about the dumb dildo theory. Danny, what happens if like people start getting like reactions and stuff like that? Too bad. Too bad. Well, Danny, what if they get sick? Too bad. Too bad. See, you folks don't understand what that is. I do. I know Danny. Danny is a special needs kid, 48 years old, and he doesn't understand or have an original thought in his head. He is merely parroting. And he's high up